Okay, so at the start of the lecture, what I want you to do is watch the following video very carefully. This is a reconstruction of a crime where the guy on the roof is a bomber. What I want you to do is think of how well you could identify this person on the roof. Could you describe them to a friend, or could you draw a sketch of them afterwards? So watch the following video nice and carefully. Okay, good. So, the person you just witnessed on the roof of the building was placing a bomb down the ventilation shaft. Do you reckon you could identify the bomber? So I'm going to show you another video with a lineup of 6 potential suspects. Have a look at each of these carefully and see if you can identify who was the bomber.
This is a good one.
Okay, so that's the 6 suspects. It's a good time now maybe just to write down which of those you think was your choice. Don't rewind to the start of the clip. And we're going to come back to your responses a little bit later on. So far, in the previous couple of lectures, we've largely considered memory in lab-based environments. So this is where people are almost kind of exclusively motivated to try and be as accurate as possible in their memory recall. So in other words, you're getting somebody to come into a controlled environment. We would give them a list of 20, 30 words. We might manipulate some characteristics about the words. People are told to remember these, and then they're asked to recall at some later time period. However, this is very different to how we go about memorizing details in real life. So in real life, we're not always motivated to be as strictly accurate as possible. Instead, we're often motivated by a variety of different goals that may influence our memory and recall. So indeed, if you think about a lot of your everyday remembering, the motivation or the purpose of it is in order to tell each other stories about what's happened to you. So for example, if you imagine telling a friend about something that you did at the weekend, is it the case that you recall every event truthfully? Or is there some minor changes to reality in order to make these stories more entertaining? Was it the case that the party that you went to was really amazing? Did you drink quite as many cocktails or go to bed quite as late as you reported to other people? So for example, for me, I have some memories where the reality and the retold myth afterwards probably blend into each other in a way that I can't easily tell with certainty what was actually true and what I falsely believe to be true, because that is how the story has morphed over time. So one nice example of this is I can remember going diving in Belize once, and I'd been diving 15 meters down for maybe about 3-4 minutes, and I started to run out of air. And I remember coming up to the surface after doing a brief decompression stop, and I couldn't find the boat for about 15 minutes. So it was a very choppy sea, and the only time that I could see it was when I was at the top of this wave and the boat in the distance was at the top of this wave. But I also know that I potentially exaggerate details of that story during the initial retellings. to the degree where I might have only actually been waiting for sort of 5 minutes until I could actually see that boat and before it came round and picked me up. So we get these important differences that in real life, our natural memories are frequently rehearsed and they tend to be of events a long time ago. This is in contrast to most of the memory research studies test information that's learned a short time ago. So you're getting somebody into the lab, tell them to remember stuff, and then you test them after an hour or a matter of minutes. There's also an issue of relevance. So in real life, we learn information that is relevant to our own personal interests and goals. Whereas in the lab, we're learning whatever is instructed by the researcher. Finally, we have different goals and motivations. So in the lab, we're motivated to be as accurate as possible. So generally, we want to report as many accurate memories as we can. Whereas in real life, our motivation is a little bit different. We're motivated to be entertaining. We're motivated to be agreeable. So we don't want to retell stories in a way that's going to offend or insult other people. And generally, we want to make ourselves look positive when we retell these stories. So we might twist or morph details in a self-enhancing way to make ourselves look a little bit more positive in these individual retellings. One nice demonstration of the inaccuracy of our stories over time comes from a study done by Marsh and Barbara Tversky. And this was actually done with some Intro to Cognition students where they asked them to think about a personal memory. So this could be a social event or something professional. And to write down all of the details of that event and then to retell that story to other people over the next month and then compare what was the accuracy of the retellings to the original story or the original event that had happened. And they found that 42% of these retellings were evaluated as being inaccurate. And then even through the ones that they rated or perceived as being accurate, these still seem to include some form of distortion. So a lot of the distortions or the inaccuracies can be categorized as being exaggerations that you might make. So exaggerating the details of something or how fun or how much you did of something. It might involve minimizing certain details. It would involve selectivity, so not telling everything and omitting certain details or adding additional information that didn't necessarily occur. Another nice example of a study that showed this that was done by Dudokovic and colleagues in 2004. They asked participants to read a story and then recall this same story 3 times, either accurately or entertainingly. And the story that they were given was told from the first person perspective of a bartender who had only been working for 3 weeks. And the story described a particularly hectic night for the bartender. It contained both interesting events, so there would be a pregnant woman that's going into labour in the bar. You've got an intoxicated woman that's spilling wine all over another woman's white shirt. And then there would also be some relatively mundane or boring events, such as a man asking the bartender for a napkin and the bartender preparing cocktails. And the story was written in an amusing manner in order to try and ensure that it was a series of events that people would want to retell in real life. So in one condition, they asked participants to tell that story as accurately as possible. So to imagine yourself as if you're describing the events to a policeman or a lawyer. In a second condition, they would ask participants to tell it as entertainingly as possible. So imagine you're there standing up in front of your peer group and your friends, and your objective or your goal is to amuse them. The results that they found is that in the condition where you're doing this entertaining or amusing retell, this would involve much more emotion. There would also be less concrete details, and then when participants are later asked to recall, they found that the entertaining group would have much worse memory for specific events, and particularly for the details that were boring or uneventful during that evening. So we find the kind of conclusion from this is that tailoring a message about an event to suit a given audience can cause subsequent inaccuracies in our memories for that event.